Tawa had lived alone for so long that even the hills knew his footsteps better than the people did. For 10 years, he had walked the same narrow trail between the tall pines, the wide grasslands, and the quiet creek where he caught his fish every morning. His world had become small, calm, and silent. He moved like the wind, soft, steady, and without need for attention. Most people in the nearby villages believed he had disappeared or chosen the spirit world after the tragic winter when he lost his family. But he was still alive, living quietly with only the land and the animals as his company. He did not fear loneliness. Loneliness had become his companion. He spoke to the rivers when he needed comfort. He listened to the birds when he needed direction. He watched the sunrise every day, telling himself that if the sun still rose for him, he should rise too. On the morning when everything changed, the world felt strange. The sky had a thin curtain of clouds stretching from one end to the other, and the air felt heavy, like it was holding back a storm. Tawa noticed at the moment he stepped out of his small shelter, built under a rock ledge. He stood for a long moment, watching the sky as if it were trying to speak to him. He gathered his tools, his handmade axe, a coiled rope, and a small pouch of dried berries and began walking toward the forest to collect firewood. His steps were slow, but steady. He knew every curve of the trail, every fallen branch, every stone half buried in the ground. 10 years of walking the same path made the forest feel like a living memory as he moved deeper into the woods. He heard something unusual. It was the rumble of wheels, the cry of a horse, and the low voices of people trying to comfort one another. Tawa froze. People did not usually come this deep into the hills. Travelers avoided the rough paths, broken ground, and unpredictable weather. Something must have gone wrong. Tawa followed the sound, stepping quietly between trees until he reached a clearing near the creek. There, he saw a small group of people gathered around a broken wagon. The wheel lay twisted and cracked in the mud, and one horse was breathing heavily. Trying to stay steady on tired legs, in the middle of the group stood a young Lakota woman with 2 older relatives beside her. Her dress was simple, but well cared for, her braids neat, and her eyes full of concern. She seemed to be the one everyone looked toward, as if her reaction mattered the most. Tawa stayed behind a tree for a few moments, unsure if he should approach. 10 years of isolation made him careful, even shy. He did not want to frighten anyone. But then he heard the woman speak. "Is the storm coming soon?" Her voice was soft, worried. One of the older men with her looked up at the dark clouds. "Yes, before sunset." The young woman touched her forehead lightly, trying to think. "Then we cannot stay here. Cannot walk fast enough," the older woman said. And the wagon, her words ended in a sigh. Tawa knew what happened next. It was not his choice, but the land's. He stepped out from behind the trees and walked toward them. His steps made soft sounds on the wet ground, and all 4 people turned to him with surprise. The horses lifted their heads too, ears twitching. The older man reached for a walking stick, just to be careful. The young woman looked at Tawa with calm but curious eyes. He did not rush. He stopped a few steps away and raised one open hand in a peaceful gesture. "I can help," he said quietly. His voice sounded deeper than he remembered. He had not spoken to people in years, and the words felt heavy in his mouth. The group exchanged careful glances. They saw his long hair, the handmade clothing, the quiet strength in the way he stood. He looked like someone who lived close to the earth, someone who knew the forest well. "You know this land?" the older man asked. Tawa nodded. "I live nearby." The young woman stepped forward slightly. "We are grateful. Our wheel broke, and the storm is close." Tawa kneeled to examine the wheel. One look told him the truth. "It cannot be fixed," he said softly. "The wood is cracked. The storm will reach here soon. You need shelter." The woman looked at the sky again, worry growing on her face. "Is there a safe place nearby?" Tawa nodded. "Follow me. There is a dry place under the ridge. You will stay safe there." The group hesitated only for a second. They looked at each other, trusting the land's guidance more than their fears. The older man gestured respectfully toward. Toward, we accept your help, friend. Tawar quietly began leading them and their horses through a narrow trail that only he knew. The young woman walked close behind him. Even though she did not speak much at first, Tawa could sense her observing everything: how he moved around fallen branches, how he tied the rope around the horse's bridle to help guide it across muddy ground, how he checked the sky every few minutes. When they reached the shelter under the rock ridge, the wind had already started to pick up. The clouds were swollen and dark. Rain threatened to fall at any moment. "We will be safe here," Tawa said. He began gathering dry branches from nearby trees and building a fire for them. The young woman sat near the stone wall, warming her hands. After a moment, she spoke softly. "You live alone?" Tawa nodded. "Yes. How long?" He hesitated. The words felt heavy, but true. 10 years. She blinked. 10 years? He nodded again. "I have not seen a woman in 10 years. The group looked at him with surprise, not fear, just deep curiosity. The young woman's expression softened, as if she suddenly understood something about him. She saw not a strange man, but someone carrying a long, quiet sadness. "Oh," she said in a gentle voice, "that is a very long time." Tawa did not answer, but the silence between them was warm, not sharp. He stayed awake as the storm rolled through the hills. Wind roared through the branches. Rain hit the ground in heavy sheets. Thunder echoed across the sky. The young woman and her relatives rested against the rock wall, comforted by the fire's glow. From time to time, Tawa checked the horses, calming them with a hand on their necks. The young woman watched him from the fire, noticing how softly he spoke to the animals, how he treated them with care and patience. It told her more about his character than words ever could. When the storm finally weakened near dawn, travelers woke to the smell of warm earth and fresh air. The worst had passed. The young woman stood, brushing dust from her dress. "Thank you," she said. "You have our deep respect." Tawa bowed his head, unsure how to respond. Her voice felt warm, gentle, and honest. The older man asked, "Will you guide us to the nearest village?" Tawa nodded. "I will walk with you. There are sharp stones and broken paths. You should not go alone." The group prepared their things. The young woman tried to thank him again, but Tawa simply said, "The land guides all of us." As they began walking through the morning mist, one thing was clear: the warrior who had lived alone for 10 years was no longer walking alone. And though he did not know it yet, this young woman's presence would change the direction of his life in ways he never could have imagined. The morning after the storm felt fresh and calm, as if the land had washed away all the noise of the night. The air smelled of wet grass and pine, and the sunlight rested softly on the hills. Tawa Kinyan stood near the creek, filling a small bottle with clean water while the travelers prepared their things. He watched the group from a distance, unsure how to behave. For 10 years he had spoken only to trees, rivers, and the wind. Now suddenly he had people around him, people who smiled at him, thanked him, and trusted him. It felt strange, but gentle, like waking from a long sleep and finding warm light in the room. The young woman Vyaka noticed him standing quietly with the bottle of water. She approached slowly, not wanting to disturb him. "You are awake before all of us," she said kindly. "Do you always rise this early?" Tawa nodded. "The sun wakes me." She smiled softly. "You live close to the land. I can see that." He did not know how to answer, so he simply handed her the bottle. "Drink. You will need strength. The path to the village is long." She accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you." When she drank, Tawa looked away out of respect, focusing on the horses instead. After a moment, she returned the bottle, their hands almost touching. He felt a small spark inside his chest, something he had not felt in many years: human closeness. But he quickly stepped back, knowing his place. He was only guiding them. Soon they would reach the village, and he would return to his lonely hills. The group began their journey, moving slowly across uneven ground. The horses walked carefully, and Tawa led the way with confident steps. He knew the land well. He avoided patches of mud, rocks hidden under tall grass, and places where the ground was too soft from the night's rain. Viaka walked close behind him, her footsteps light, her eyes observing everything he did. From time to time, she asked a gentle question. "Do you hunt every day?" "Only when I need to," he replied. "Do you speak with anyone?" "No." "Do you not miss people?" Toa paused at her last question. He had not been asked something like that in years. "I miss them in my heart," he said slowly, "but I learned to live without them." She looked at him with a softness he did not understand. "You have a good heart. You helped strangers in a storm. That tells me you still belong among people." He did not respond, but her words touched something deep inside him, something he had buried long ago. As they continued walking, the land began to change. The thick forest opened into wide grasslands. A warm breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Birds called from distant trees. Toa moved with ease, guiding the group like a silent guardian. After an hour of walking, the older woman grew tired and asked to rest. They stopped under a tall cottonwood tree. Tawa checked the sky again. Always the sky, always searching for signs of danger or change. Viaka sat on a fallen log, catching her breath. She watched him from where she sat. He stood tall but humble, his hands always busy, his eyes always moving. There was something steady about him, something grounded. She felt safe near him, the kind of safety that came not from strength alone, but from kindness. "You do not talk much," she said when he returned from checking the horses. "I have forgotten how," Toa answered honestly. She smiled. "Then you may practice with me." He blinked, not sure if she was joking, but her smile was genuine. For the first time in a long while, he allowed a small smile to appear on his face too. It felt strange, but good. They walked again after resting. As they moved, Viaka began telling him small things about her life. Nothing heavy, nothing painful. Just pieces of her journey. "I am going to meet a man my family chose for me," she explained. "I do not know him well." Tawa's steps slowed for a moment. "You do not wish to go?" She looked down at the ground. "I do not know. I want to honor my family, but my heart is unsure." Tawa listened silently. He did not know how to guide her. He had lost his own family long ago, his wife and small child taken by sickness in the harsh winter. Since then, he had lived away from villages, unable to face the memories. Viaka noticed the distant look in his eyes. "You lost someone?" she asked softly. Tawa nodded, his face calm but sad. Yes, she did not push for details. She only said, "I am sorry." They continued walking, and even though they did not talk after that, they felt connected in a quiet way to people who understood loss and uncertainty, walking the same path for a short but important moment. By midday, the sun grew warm. The group stopped near a small spring. Tawa brought water for the horses, and Viaka helped the older woman prepare a light meal. When Viaka finished her work, she walked toward Tawa again. "Tell me something about the hills," she asked. "You speak as if they are friends." "They are," he said simply. She waited, hoping he would say more. Toyd pointed to a ridge in the distance. "That place protects from storms." And beyond that, he pointed to a valley. "There is a meadow where the deer sleep. When the wind is soft, it carries the sound of the river far across the grass." Viaka listened like a child hearing a story. Tawa was surprised by her interest. Most people did not care for the land the way he did, but she seemed to understand the bond he had with it. "You see the world with respect," she said. "My grandmother always said that is the sign of a good man." Tawa said nothing, but he felt his chest warm at her words. When they were ready to move again, the path became narrow, running between two hills. Tawa walked ahead, checking every turn. He gently guided Viaka's hand when the ground sloped sharply, making sure she did not fall. She felt his strength and steadiness in those small moments, and she found herself trusting him more and more. Later in the afternoon, clouds began gathering again, not a storm, but enough to dim the sky. Viaka grew quiet, deep in thought. Tawa, noticing her silence, spoke softly. "Your heart is troubled." She nodded gently. "Yes. Will this marriage bring you peace?" he asked. She hesitated. "I do not know the man. I do not know if he is kind. Tawa understood her fear. Kindness was a rare gift, and she deserved it. You will know when you meet him, he said. Your heart will tell you. She looked at him for a long moment. Your heart speaks through your actions, Tawa. I see that. He looked away, feeling a strange warmth inside him. It had been years since anyone had spoken to him with such sincerity. As they continued walking, the land grew familiar. The path widened, and the sound of distant drums echoed faintly from beyond the hills. They were near the village. Wiaka's breath caught in her throat. The moment was real now. She would have to meet her future and accept whatever waited for her. Tawa felt something tightening inside him, too. He did not want to leave her yet, though he knew he must. She did not belong to his world of silence and solitude. She belonged to people, to family, to community. Still, a small part of him wished he could stay near her just a little longer. As they approached the village's edge, his children ran past, playing in the dust. Women carrying baskets stopped to look at the group. Men repairing tools greeted the older man with nods. Everyone noticed the tall, quiet stranger walking with them. When the groom's family approached, their expressions were stiff and serious. They seemed more annoyed about the delay than relieved that Wiaka had arrived safely. One of them said, "You are late." We waited. Wiaka lowered her eyes respectfully. The storm broke our wagon, she explained softly. This man guided us. The groom himself stood with crossed arms. He barely looked at her. Instead of asking if she was hurt, he only said we could have met yesterday. Now we lose time. Tawa stepped slightly closer, sensing her discomfort, but he did not interfere. The group began talking, but their tone toward Wiaka was cold. Tawa watched quietly, feeling his chest tighten again, not from anger, but from sadness. She had traveled safely, only to be met with harsh faces. When the family finally turned away, preparing to guide Wiaka toward the lodge where she would rest, Tawa understood that his time with them had ended. He lowered his head, preparing to leave. Before he could take a step, Wiaka turned toward him, Tawa. Her voice held something he could not name. He stopped, waiting. "Thank you," she said with emotion. "For everything." He nodded once. His heart felt heavy, but he kept his expression calm. And as he walked away from the village, returning to the path that led back to his lonely hills, Wiaka watched him until he disappeared behind the tall grasser eyes, full of questions. Fear and something else she did not yet understand. Tawa Kinyon walked away from the village with steady steps, but his heart felt heavier with each passing moment. The tall grass brushed against his legs as he followed the familiar path back toward the hills, back to silence. Back to loneliness, back to the life he had known for 10 long years. Yet something felt different now. The quiet no longer felt like a friend. It felt like an empty space he had suddenly become aware of. He kept seeing Wiaka's face in his mind, her calm eyes, her gentle voice, her trust when she walked behind him on the narrow paths. He tried to push the thoughts away, reminding himself of the truth. She belongs with her people. I live alone, still. Every step away from the village felt like stepping deeper into a cold shadow. Meanwhile, inside the village, Wiaka stood quietly near her relatives while her future husband's family discussed the delayed meeting. They spoke quickly, their voices sharp at times, their words focused on schedules, ceremonies, and expectations. Not once did they ask how she felt, whether she was tired, whether she was frightened during the storm, or whether she had eaten. The groom, whose name was Sapa, looked at her briefly. He did not smile or show any warmth. He only frowned and said, "You cause trouble for everyone." Wiaka kept her head lowered. She had been raised to be respectful, but deep inside, she felt her chest tighten. She had expected nerves or uncertainty about marrying a stranger, but she had not expected this coldness. Her relatives noticed the tension but stayed quiet, unsure what to do. The arrangement had been made months ago. They believed it was their responsibility to honor it. Sapa pointed toward a small lodge. "Go rest there. Tomorrow we will speak about the wedding tasks." Wiaka turned to walk, but he reached out and took her wrist knot, painfully, but with a firm grip that made her stop. "And do not wander. People already think this delay is your fault." His grip lasted only a moment before he let go. But that brief action made her heart sink. It was not about strength, it was about not being seen, not being valued. Viaka stepped back, her breath unsteady. Her grandmother's teachings echoed in her mind. A woman is not a burden. She deserves respect, kindness, and a partner who treats her with care. She looked toward the path where Tawa had disappeared earlier. Her chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. She turned to her relatives, her voice shaking but strong. I do not want this. Everyone froze. The air around them grew still. Her aunt whispered, Viaka, think carefully. This is a respected family. But Viaka shook her head slowly. I traveled in a storm. I walked miles through wet hills. And when I arrived, no one asked if I was safe or cold. This is not the place where my spirit will grow. The groom's family murmured in anger, calling her decision foolish, stubborn, emotional. Sapa stepped closer, his jaw tight with frustration. You cannot break an agreement like this, he said sharply. People will speak badly of you. Viaka lifted her chin. People can speak, but I will not live a life where I am treated like a problem. Her relatives stood helpless, torn between tradition and the truth in her words at that moment. A soft voice spoke behind them. She should not be forced. Everyone turned. Tawa stood at the edge of the village. He had walked away, yes, but only for a few minutes, before something inside him refused to let him go farther. He did not return for himself. He returned because the memory of Wayaka's quiet bravery would not leave him. He approached slowly, respectfully, his posture calm and humble. He did not raise his voice. He did not act like a hero. He simply stood beside Viaka with dignity. Sapa scoffed. This is not your concern. Leave before trouble starts. Toa spoke softly. I do not want trouble. I only speak because she deserves respect. Viaka felt her heart steady in her chest. She did not expect him to return, but his presence made her feel less alone. The villagers whispered among themselves. They saw the way Viaka looked at Tawa with trust, not fear. They saw how Toa stood with calm strength, not aggression. One elder stepped forward. If the woman refuses the marriage, the arrangement cannot continue unless she agrees. Sapa's family protested, but the elder raised a hand. A union without peace brings only sorrow. Viaka looked at her relatives. Her aunt touched her shoulder gently. Child, if this brings you peace, we will support you. Tears welled in Viaka's eyes, not from sadness but from relief. Sa turned away angrily, muttering, let her go. She is not worth the trouble. His words floated in the air like cold ash. Toa's eyes softened as he stepped closer to Viaka. Do you wish to leave this place? He asked softly. Viaka looked into his gentle, steady eyes. The eyes of a man who had walked alone for 10 years, yet still offered kindness to strangers. Yes, she whispered. The elder looked at Tawa. If you guide her, you must do so with honor. A woman choosing a new path is a serious step. Tawa bowed his head. I will guide her with respect. If she chooses me, I will honor her choice every day. Viaka felt warmth bloom in her heart. She did not choose him because he saved her or because he was strong. She chose him because he had a heart that listened to Vin when he spoke very little. The elder nodded. Then the choice is made. There was no big ceremony, no loud music, no crowd. Only a simple gathering of a few elders and Viaka's relatives. They stood in a circle as the elder spoke soft. Meaningful words, a blessing for a peaceful life, a reminder to treat each other with honesty, and a prayer for their future. Wa placed his hand over his heart, promising to protect and respect her. Viaka placed her hand gently on his. Their vows were quiet, but they carried the strength of truth. That evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, Viaka walked beside Tawa along the trail that led away from the village. Her steps were steady, her heart peaceful. Are you afraid? Tawa asked softly. She shook her head. No, I feel safe with you. He looked ahead at the land, the familiar trees, the open fields, the sky turning orange. My home is simple. My life is quiet. She smiled gently. A quiet life is not a bad life, Tawa, and a simple home is a good place to build new memories. He glanced at her, a soft glow in his eyes. You left everything for a path you did not know. I chose a path where my heart can grow, she answered. They walked in silence for a while, but it was not the lonely silence Tawa once lived in. This silence felt warm, shared, filled with hope. When they reached his shelter near the rock ridge, Bianca looked at it without fear or disappointment. She stepped inside, touching the walls gently, observing the handmade tools, the small fire pit, the woven blanket. This place kept you safe, she said, and now it will keep us safe. Tawa watched her with quiet amazement. For 10 years, this place had been a home only to him, a place of sorrow, memory, and solitude. Now, with her presence, it felt different. It felt alive. That night, they sat together by the fire outside the shelter. The stars shone brightly above them. The wind carried the soft song of night birds. Viaka spoke in a quiet voice. You saved me from the storm. But more than that, you showed me kindness when I felt alone. Tawa lowered his head. You gave me something too? She looked at him with surprise. What? He took a breath, his voice steady, but full of emotion. You reminded me that I am still part of this world. Viaka felt tears in her eyes. She reached out and gently held his hand. We will walk this world together now. Tawa looked at their joined hands, then at the stars, then back at her. For the first time in 10 years, he felt whole, not because he found someone to fill the silence, but because he found someone who understood it. As the fire crackled softly beside them, Tawa realized he was no longer the lonely warrior who hid from the world. He was a man starting a new life, chosen not by fate, but by a woman whose heart recognized his. And in that moment, under the quiet sky, Viaka knew she had made the right choice, the bravest, truest choice of her life.